Welcome back, everyone. In the last video, we discussed accessibility of data based on Context API and Redux. In this video, we are going to reinforce that, but primarily also discuss the flow of data and how the structure of our code changes. Even the high-level concepts change a little bit, which we'll cover inside of this video. So let's start with context. Context we can mainly see as being separated into two portions. We have UI components, and then we have context with reducers. These context reducers are, of course, the components that wrap the corresponding UI components. So imagine if we had three different components in our app, component 1, component 2, and component 3, and then we had two different contexts, context A and context B. Let's say that context A wraps around component 1 and component 2, as we saw in our last video. Let's say context B wraps around component 3. Now let's say respectively, each of these contexts also have their own reducer, which they're using for state management. So this is what we wrote in the last few videos where we used the use reducer hook. Here the flow of data for context A is we're going to have a dispatch that fires actions into reducer A. Because use reducer, as we know, gives us a dispatch unique to that reducer. So we might pass that dispatch directly to components 1 and 2, or we might create action generator functions as we did inside of our context and then pass that down. Remember, that was our set current user, or that was our set is open. Those are all dispatch action-based creators. So component 1 and component 2, of course, will then in turn potentially dispatch actions that update reducer A. Reducer A's state then will have some values which get consumed by component 1 and component 2. So this is the flow of data. The components drive actions into the reducers then drive their corresponding values to their components. This is going to be the same flow with context B. You're going to have component 3 dispatching actions to reducer B using reducer B's unique dispatch, and then reducer B, of course, is going to pass those values to component 3, which is what context B wraps around. So this is pretty much the flow of data that we've seen with our contexts. Now let's talk about Redux. With Redux, we still have UI components. So let's imagine that we still have the same 3 components, but now we also have this Redux store. And the Redux store structure is going to have 3 separate reducers. These are still functions that return objects, and those objects just carry the state of that reducer. So nothing here has changed. Everything you know about reducers is exactly the same. The difference, though, is that we have 3 different reducers. For example, you can have more, you can have less, it doesn't matter. But the idea is that you have A, B, and C reducer. These reducers all combine together into something known as the root reducer. The root reducer takes each of these and combines them into one giant reducer. From this reducer, we will then pass state into component 1, component 2, and component 3. You pass the entire state object. You don't just pass reducer A's value or reducer B's value. You pass the entire state object through to component 1, component 2, and component 3. And then similarly, what will happen is that these components, of course, are going to dispatch actions, but it's one dispatch method. Remember, with context, each use reducer gives you a new dispatch that goes specifically to the respective use reducer hook. Here with Redux, we have one dispatch action. Essentially, you're going to dispatch actions using the one dispatch, and all of these reducers are all going to receive those actions. But what happens is that we have to determine in the corresponding reducer what to update. So these actions may update reducer A, may update reducer B, or update reducer C. In fact, the same action can update all 3 reducers if these 3 reducers choose to update based on that action. But this is the different flow of Redux. So the main thing to understand is that there is a much more singular store. So as a result, there's a singular dispatch. And then it's up to our individual reducers, A, B, and C, to determine if they want to update their state appropriately. So in the next video, what we're going to do is we're going to take all of these concepts and we're going to focus on working with them in the code base. So join me in the next video where we will take all of these high-level concepts and push them into Redux code. I'll see you in the next video.